Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Performance Cafe. It's lovely to have you here as we continue our journey in understanding self-leadership. Today we're going to talk about the link between self-awareness and self-leadership. So when we're self-aware, it just means that we can objectively evaluate ourselves, understand ourselves, manage our emotions, align our behavior with our values, and understand correctly how others perceive us. And so a lot of this comes from understanding our personality traits. So can we predict and explain our thoughts, our feelings, our behavior, specifically in spontaneous situations, right? If we get caught off guard, how will we respond? So I'd like us to do a quick little self-assessment. Let's see how self-aware you are. Let's see if it's as good as you think. So the first question is, what's your most important value? You may have several. What's the most important one? Second, what's your biggest strength? How does that show up for you? How does that work for you? What's your biggest weakness? What's the impact of that on your behavior and what you like to do? What's your biggest trigger? What's that one thing that when it happens, you know you're going to have a very particular reaction? Number 5, what is that reaction? And where does it sit in your body? You know? Number 6, what's your biggest fear? What's the monster underneath the bed? What's that thing that no matter how old you are, actually always comes up for you when you're feeling vulnerable? 7, where does that fear come from? Is it a new fear? Is it something that you were raised with? Number 8, how do others perceive you? And how accurate is that perception so that when they describe it to you, that you say, yes, that's me. I see where you're coming from. Now, actually, some of those questions are kind of difficult to answer. And some of them we don't particularly enjoy even looking at. But it is vital in understanding our needs, our motives, and our drives, because that's going to tell us why we feel what we feel. So the one is, what am I feeling? The other one is why. And the third one is, why is that important? Right? Because when I understand why something is important, I can understand my reaction, how I'm going to react, but also how will I self-regulate? How will I lead myself and make sure that I'm regulating whatever that reaction is? So how do we do this? How do we become more self-aware? So I think the first thing about becoming more self-aware is understanding that culturally, we are not set up to have a lot of time for ourselves. And I think that is the biggest problem with self-awareness. There's no time for reflection. You know, when I work certainly with my leadership clients, when I'm working with CEOs and senior managers, then we're finding that there's no time. I don't have time for me. I don't have time to just sit and ponder and think. And yet that self-reflection is actually what I need. Why? Because in understanding myself, in becoming more self-aware, I need to take the time to become present to myself. Now, what does that presence mean? If you think about it, what were you thinking about just before you started putting on this video? Were you worried about something? Were you feeling a bit down, a bit flat? That in and of itself is a form of distraction. Because you see, when we are worrying about things, it's sometimes or quite frequently that we are anxious. And that means that it indicates that I'm worried about the future. What's going to come? What can I not control? That's actually where that comes from. The other form of distraction from presence is the past. And that is where there is regrets or depression that is showing up for us. And that is because I'm constantly in these two worlds that I can do nothing about. And the only place I can do something about it is by becoming present and sitting in this moment and understanding what's happening for me right now. What is it that I sense, as in physically sense, in my body, my mind? Is there stress? Is my tummy feeling, like it's like all knotted? What do I think? Are there negative thoughts? Is there self-criticism? What do I feel? Am I excited? Am I happy? Or is there heaviness in my heart? And so in going through that process, it's really great to be able to do something with that information. And I know a lot of people are going to roll their eyes, but journaling is really a great way of doing it. The reason for that is, as you will see from some of the greatest productivity gurus, we find that exporting thoughts from our head and putting it on paper stops us from having to rely on our memories. We've got so much to remember in this knowledge culture that we're in, that often our brains are overwhelmed. So the moment I put on a piece of paper, I'm doing better already because I'm removing that stress and I'm giving myself an opportunity to be more present to myself or something else. And when I say journaling, I'm not talking about a page. I'm talking about bullet points. I'm talking about doodling, anything that will make sense to you when you come back to it. And what's really great is that if you're in a tight spot for a couple of days, if you just go back in your journal, you'll see there were good days before. So sometimes even that helps to lift one from that sense of anxiousness or depression. And so now that I'm present to myself, I can see what it is that's important to me, what it is that I'm aware of in myself. How do I want to self-lead? Where do I want to self-lead? Where was I not great in self-leadership and I actually need to take care of this? But there are a couple of other ways that we can also establish this quiet time, this place for reflection. And we can come back to the journaling and pop it into the journal later. When we're doing an activity that is taxing to the point where we cannot focus on anything else, whether we're practicing a piece of music, doing Pilates, yoga, running, from that perspective, our bodies are busy, but our minds have time to reflect. Walking is another great way of finding that quiet presence. Again, the body is busy, but it's not so taxed that it's taking over the entire body. It's taking over the entire mind. My apologies. And then, of course, meditation, prayer. What comes up for me when I'm meditating? What comes up for me when I'm praying? You know, I love the way that when we talk about meditation, we speak of, you know, the clouds that are above you, and you can see your thoughts of what's coming up when you put it on top of the cloud and just let it float away. At the same time, we are aware of what's on that cloud and what is important to us, what's pushing right now. So I hope that in this video you've understood that we need this presence with ourselves, we need that quiet time, we need the reflection, and that from that we can see, where do I want to go with my life? What is important for me? What is useful to me? And so from that perspective, we then know how to self-lead. And at this point in time, don't be too stressed. It may just be what is important to me. It doesn't need to be much more than that. It doesn't need to be a fully formed thought, because in our next episode, we're going to be talking more about that. I hope you found this useful. As always, if you have, there are matching blogs on our website at performforward.com. And yes, I look forward to seeing you next week on the Performance Cafe.